Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And I'll just start off up front with this episode, letting you know that it should be a relatively quick one. You probably can tell that from the timestamp on the episode, but I did promise several of you in the comments to the last episode that I would try to put out one more before I have to go away for work for a bit. So this will probably be the last episode until Friday or Saturday. But certainly as we head into the weekend, we will get into the depths of this off season and hopefully have moved forward far enough that maybe some bargains will be beginning to emerge on the free agent market. Have read all the comments to our previous episodes, although I'm not going to get into as much depth addressing some of those things that you've brought up in this episode, since it is late Tuesday night and I need to get some sleep before traveling tomorrow, and I also need to pack and get to the airport and do many exciting things tomorrow morning, so it's going to be a busy morning. But Bald Sherlock did kind of note that there were some interesting players on the trade block here, and even some interesting additional players when we go and we look at the full trade block. Doesn't seem like there's anything really attainable for us right now, unfortunately, at least as far as prices that I'd be willing to pay. But I am going to continue looking at the options there. Similarly, there's a number of interesting free agents available that we talked out at the last episode. Samuel Overend in NS1 CLRK identified some names that we are looking at and going to monitor. But again, I don't think there's anything necessarily that we do immediately. So I really think the main goal for this episode is just going to be to sim ahead a few weeks, get through the Rule 5 draft. I did promise in the last episode that I'd kind of highlight some of the top international amateur free agents. Anyone who wants to give me opinions on those over the next couple of days certainly will be helpful to me when I come back. But I don't think I'm going to sim ahead all the way to mid-January when the IAFA period begins in this episode, so it's possible that by the time we get to that period we'll have better scouting reports on some of these people, and we'll certainly have one more camp with all of these players, or more accurately with the 10 players that we are targeting most closely in the beginning of January. So hopefully we'll have even better information than the information we're going to discuss right now when we get to the actual IAFA period. But in the meantime, wanted to leave those of you who are willing to dig in a little deeper to this episode and share some thoughts with me an opportunity to do that, since I'll have plenty of time to not have a new episode coming out. So any information you can share. You can tell that I'm tired because I'm just kind of rambling right now. But like I said I'd get an episode out. And as I've said many times on this channel, without the viewers, I'm just a middle-aged man talking to himself while playing a computer baseball game. So trying to keep my commitments to our viewers is something that's important to me. And we've simmed ahead a bit to the start of the winter meetings. We've also been aggressively scouting the international amateur free agents. We've already done our trip to the training camp here in the month of December, but still hoping to get a little more information on the players before we talk about them with you. Major League Draft lottery results announced, and we got extremely lucky again this year. You can see we were supposed to be picking 9th, and we will be picking 3rd in the draft this upcoming year. So it's going to mean we're going to need to set aside a bit more money than we had previously anticipated. We had 10 million set aside before, which was basically right in line with what we needed. I think when we sim forward today, that number will be bigger. But the opportunity to have a top 3 pick again in July is a big win for us. You can see there were some upsets this year. The Blue Jays, who were supposed to be picking 5th, the Tigers, who were supposed to be picking 12th, and our A's, who were supposed to be picking 9th, moved up to 1, 2, and 3 respectively, while the Angels, Cardinals, and the Giants, who were supposed to have the top 3 picks, ended up in the 4th, 5th, and 6th slots. And we did finally get scouting reports back on the 2 international free agents that were most interesting to us. First baseman Juan Mendoza, we're only up to average scouting accuracy with him. He still looks like he could be a very impressive major league hitter, but he's also still looking for $23.3 million a year. So definitely out of our price range. Shortstop Hideki Arakawa, we're up to high scouting accuracy on him. He still looks like an interesting guy to consider. We did make an offer to him. I believe we're still waiting to get official word from him. Yeah, he favors the offer, actually. It was a minor league contract, but I believe it was a major league deal if he's on the 26-man roster. I think we were paying him around $1 million potentially, and by virtue of the contract we offered him, if he doesn't make the major league roster coming out of spring training, within 30 days he can move on and go somewhere else. I think that's a perfectly reasonable risk to take. Certainly think he could be in the mix for us as a utility infielder, particularly if we get him a little more versatile in spring training in terms of the positions that he can play. We'll request another scouting report on him just to hopefully get up to very high scouting accuracy, but would be happy to have either of those guys in our organization, but clearly, based on the price, Arakawa much more likely to end up in the Oakland organization than Juan Mendoza at this point. And as we get ready for the Rule 5 draft, one of the big players in the market off it, not surprisingly, the rich get richer, as Gunnar Henderson has signed with the Yankees. Although honestly, the Yankees have been a pretty bad team in this play through the last couple of years. But big deal there, 8 years, $232 million, and Henderson can opt out after the 3rd season. So a much more significant commitment to him financially by the Yankees than we would have ever been able to compete with, at least at present, here in Oakland. And unfortunately, the Rule 5 draft this year is not that impressive to me. We are going to make a pick, and it's a familiar name. You may remember Oslevis Basabe, who I believe we picked in the Rule 5 a year ago from the Red Sox. I don't know if that shows in the history or not. Yep. 12, 24, 27. So a year ago today, we picked him in the Rule 5 draft from the Red Sox. We ended up sending him back coming out of spring training. But it is a different situation this year. We've traded away Darryl Hernandez. We've traded away Hidero Endo. And we've traded away Eddys Leonard this past offseason. So there's definitely at least one, if not 2, utility infielder spots available on our team. I don't know that Basabe ultimately will earn one of them, but he is versatile defensively, decent speed, and he at least can hit the ball. Batted .281 last year in AAA Worcester, and .291 and .305 in 2 levels in AAA back in 2027. Only has 50 days of major league service at this point, but we'll bring him into camp and see what happens. And here in the 2nd round, our scouting director doesn't recommend that we take anybody, and honestly, some of the more interesting names on this list are actually players who are already part of our organization. it's a weird situation, but I don't think we're going to make a second round pick. Normally, I like to bring some additional pitchers into camp, but there's just not anyone that should make our roster, and I think I would rather just kind of use free agency to bring on some players. There's not anyone all that interesting, so Basabe in the first round is going to be the only guy we pick up in the Rule 5 this year. And with the Rule 5, the relatively uneventful Rule 5 complete, we'll take a quick look at the 10 guys that we've had into camp most recently. Odds are, as far as international amateur free agents, odds are one or more of these players will be who we end up targeting next month. But if you got thoughts on who you like and don't like, would be very helpful to hear them in the comments. We are going to have the maximum $5.7 million to spend, so we can certainly sign any one player that we want. The question is whether we want to spread the money around or go after one player who we think is a potential impact player. A couple of pitchers that we've been tracking. Closer Luis Espinal is a potential 3-pitch guy, but don't really think that sinker is going to be major league quality. So he's going to be really reliant on that cutter developing to be an effective reliever. I think his stuff could be a bit above average with well above average movement and control. Do like his work ethic, but hard to imagine I'm going to go for $2.6 million plus for a likely potential reliever. Edgar Ailman, 17-year-old out of Venezuela, is the highest end pitching prospect in this class. Fly ball pitcher, throws in the low to mid 90s already. He's durable. Only a potential 3-pitch guy, but our scout does think all 3 of those pitches could be well above average to borderline exceptional, adding up to potentially excellent stuff, average movement, and a bit average control. And that's it for the pitchers. I don't tend to think that's going to be a direction that we're going to go because there's some pretty interesting hitters out there. You can see right now, according to our scout, there are 7 5-star potential everyday players, as well as shortstop Daniel Ocasio. Ocasio, a pretty well-balanced player, potentially excellent contact and above-average home run power. Not a lot of speed. Competent defensively, don't love the low error rating, but he'll still get to a decent number of balls and be able to make a lot of throws. Looking for $3 million. We do have a very strong relationship with him, but tend to think if we're going to get really aggressive and go purely high-end in this draft, it's going to be one of the 5-star everyday player prospects, so we'll take a look at them now. Center fielder Luis Anaya, 17-year-old out of the Dominican, looks like his contact and his gap power are both excellent, has some decent speed. He's a corner outfielder, does have a high work ethic. Think he could be a pretty interesting left-handed hitter. Fidel Flores, a left fielder, not much to not like about him. Pretty good personality, although he doesn't have high work ethic. Not great defensively, not great on the base paths, but his contact and his power are both potentially borderline excellent, and even his gap power and his eye could be above average. Switch hitter, and as I mentioned, a lot of real positive personality traits, even though high work ethic is not among them for Trucker Flores. Jorge Guel, a 16-year-old flounder. He is probably not a great defensive third baseman. He's certainly not a great defensive third baseman. Don't love the speed. The contact and power combination is pretty attractive, but quite honestly, if I was going to go for the contact and power combination, I think I would lean towards Mr. Flores over Mr. Guel. Still 4 other players to look at. Center fielder Juan Mascarenas, very well balanced offensive player. He is potentially above average at everything, above average speed. He is a corner outfielder. Could also potentially play first base down the line, but not much to not like about him. Don't think he's ever going to be outstanding at anything, but a guy who is 60 or higher in every batting category, if he completely develops, is a relatively unique player. So I'd say thus far, Flores and Mascarenas are probably my favorite two players. Jorge Mendoza, catcher, he would be on the short list also. I prefer my catchers to be better defensively, but when they can potentially hit the way that Avenger Mendoza can with 70 home run power and a 70 eye, if everything works out as a left-handed hitting catcher, he could be pretty interesting. He could play first base. He is 6'4". The range and error ratings aren't great, but if that bat fully developed, honestly, you could play him as designated hitter as well. Last but hopefully not least, the last two, shortstop Luis Mendoza. Nice personality with the high leadership, adaptability, and work ethic. Looks more like a third baseman than a shortstop to me. Looks like he can also play the corner outfield. Another guy with a pretty interesting bat and really good home run power and ability to potentially draw walks. And the last of the five-star prospects, Sergio Palomares. Pretty interesting to me. He is potentially exceptional in terms of his batting eye, and his gap power and his contact are also borderline exceptional. He has incredible speed, good work ethic, decent outfield range, although he's going to track down a fair amount of balls, but not necessarily be able to make all the plays when Gravedigger Palomares does get his glove on the ball. Not much home run power at all, but still a very unique profile with that contact, gap power, and eye that are all close to off the charts or off the charts in terms of his potential of proficiency. And he does also have high adaptability and work ethic, and as I noted, blazing speed. So he could be an extra base hit and an on-base percentage machine, just not going to hit for a lot of home run power. So I'd say probably Flores, Mascarenas, Palomares are probably the three most interesting to me. Jorge Mendoza and Luis Mendoza, probably the next two on my list. But I obviously haven't spent a ton of time with this, and we still have a few weeks until we get to the start of the IAFA signing period, and we still have one more session at the private training at our compound where we can bring most of these players through one more time. We might adjust the list a little bit and get a better look at some players. If there's a few that we're going to absolutely cross off the list, might as well get a better look at some other players. But I think there are some interesting options for us to consider, and with $5.7 million, we do have the opportunity to be creative. So if any viewers are still with us and they have thoughts on what they suggest potentially looking at in the IAFA period, it would obviously be helpful to me to hear those. And several of the highest end position players are off the market, but still some interesting names that some of you have mentioned recently or in previous years. Many previous years, Eloy Jimenez has been a pretty interesting recommendation. And more recently this year, I think both Joe Adele and Jack Sawinski have been suggested by Samuel Overend. So we'll continue looking at those guys and waiting for updated scouting reports on Arakawa and Mendoza. If the prices come down on some of these guys, they could be interesting. With Luis Lara being so young and cost effective at center field, I'm not inclined to pay 16 million-ish for Sawinski. That being said, he does have a pretty interesting profile. He's solid defensively, decent on the base paths, and he can hit some home runs and draw some walks. Coming off of a year where he only hit 208, but he did still put up a 105 WRC plus and a 2.5 WAR. I don't want to make a long-term commitment to him, and I don't want to make a commitment at 16 million a year to him. But guys like him, Jimenez, maybe a reunion with O'Neill Cruz, Joe Adele, Juan Mendoza. I mean, certainly Riley Green, if the price came down, would be a potentially great guy to add to the team. So there's still certainly players for us to continue keeping an eye on and investigating over the next month or two. And there's still a ton of interesting pitchers out there as well. Hunter Green is one who was mentioned by NS1CLRK that I would have my eye on. Can't afford to spend $24 million a year on him. Can't afford to spend $20 million plus on any of these top starters or relievers. But if the prices start getting a little more reasonable with some of these guys over the next month or so, I think it might be time for us to get more involved. We're also going to continue investigating the trade market. Hasn't been anything obvious to do, but with the amount of money that we do have to spend, if there's a veteran who's in the last year of his contract who we can potentially bring on without crippling our farm system, that may be an avenue for us to pursue in the trade market going forward as well. I'd prefer to spend as much of this money as possible, but I don't want to necessarily involve ourselves in a lot of long-term commitments. So still have plenty of the off season to make some moves and continue improving this team. And in a couple of days, we will continue on that journey. In the meantime, I'll be off on a little journey of my own until our next episode. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.